Good morning, students. Good morning to all. And last day we have studied about the public debt and the types of public debt and the causes of public debt. So today just we will going to study about the methods of redemption of public debt. Today we will going to study about the methods of redemption of public debt. So we have already studied the government also will be undertaking many of the welfare activities. But in the same time, if the government is unable to spending or insufficient money, it have to take the effort in which they have to borrow the money from any of the financial organizations. But if they borrow the money from any of the financial organizations, it has to repay the money. So this is the calling as a redemption of public debt. Redemptions mean the recovering. How the governments are going to recovering from the promises are the responsibility of public debt. So the process of repaying a public debt is called redemptions. The government sells securities to the public, and at the time of maturity, the persons who hold the security surrenders to the government. So mostly the government will be selling their bonds and the shares to the public. And when the period is going to mature, in that time so the government will be repurchased from the sales. Some of the methods are there to recovering the government public debt. What are the method means under the headings we can come to know. First one is sinking fund. So under the sinking fund method, the government establishes a separate fund known as a sinking fund. The government credits every year a fixed amount of money to this fund. So like it is like a personal savings. So the government also will be allotted some amount of the money in the name of a sinking fund. In case if the governments are fell down in the public debt from the sinking fund, it will be give back the money to the public. By the time the debt matures, the fund accumulates enough amount to pay off the principal along with the interest. So normally when we how we will saving if we are borrowing the money from the bank like that, the government also will be allotted some amount of the money for the purpose of repay the amount. So this is called the sinking fund. So from the sinking fund, it will be the government will be used to the sinking fund to repay the public debt. Next, conversions. Conversions means the conversion the loans. How the government will be convert the loans mean. The conversion of loans is another method of redemption of public debt. It means that an old loan is converted into the new loan. Under this system, high interest public debt is converted into a low interest public debt. Normally, how we will recovering the ornaments from the mortgaged peoples, like that, the government also will be converting the old debt from the old debt to new debt. So if the old debt has the high interest rate means, so when we are converted to the new debt, the new debt will have the low interest rate. Next, the budgetary surplus. When the government presents the surplus budget, so normally every year the government will made one of the budget, and if the budget is became as a budgetary surplus, we will have some of the surplus budget. So it can be utilized the repaying the debt. So what is the meaning of budgetary surplus means? Our the government income is very higher than the government expenditures. It is considered as a surplus budget. Then we have some of the surplus amount of capital. The surplus amount of capital will going to use to repay the public debt. The surplus occurs where the public revenue exceeds the public expenditures. However, this method is rarely possible because most of the government will never still made the budgetary surplus. Next, terminal annuity. The terminal annuity means it is one type of the installment system. So in this terminal annuity method, the government pays off the public debt on the basis of the terminal annuity in equal annual installments. This is the easiest way of paying off the public debt. So for example, the 1,000 crores are there as a public debt to the government mean. So it will give us a 100 or 10 100 are the sum of the amount of money. Next, reputations. Reputations means the refusing to repay the money. So it is the easiest way for the government to get rid of the burden of payment of a loan. In such cases, the government does not recognize its obligations to repay the loan. So the government only have more power to refuse or repay the money. So when we are comparing to the government and the individual persons cannot refuse the government order. But here the government only is a order maker. But in this sense, if the government is unable to repay the money to any of the individual organizations, it will refuse. However, in normal case, the government does not do it like so. If done it, it will lose its creditability and the good name of the government. Next, reduction in rate of interest. So another one method of the debt redemption is the compulsory reduction in the rate of interest during the time of financial crisis. So normally the government only will the power already we have studied as we have studied already. So the government only will be reduced the rate of interest as purposely. Then on the basis of reduced rate of interest, it will be give back the money to the other individual persons. Next, capital levy. This is also one of the implications of government powers. When the government imposes levy on the capital assets owned by an individual or any institutions, it is called capital levy. Normally, the capital levy is imposed by the government to the individual persons or any of the institutions. So, when any of the financial crisis time, the government purposely will be increasing the capital levy as a 100% or the 200%. So, this is also will be leaded to lose the name of the government. So, this levy is imposed on the capital assets above a minimum limited. So the fund is so collected and can be used by the government for paying off wartime debt obligations. So normally the government will never use this method, but if any of the problem, the war or the heavy inflationary crisis is there, that time only it will be implementing. So the 7 methods are there to recovering the public debt by the government. Next, the budget. I think you may have heard about the name budget or the term budget. The word budget is said to have an origin from the French word bouquet. The meaning of the bouquet refers to a small leather bag. Small leather bag. The budget is an annual financial statement which shows the estimated income and expenditure of the government for the forthcoming financial years. Normally, we have seen in the news channels. So every year the financial minister will going to submitted the annual report or the budget for the upcoming forthcoming years, financial years. So only the budget name is taken from the French word. So if all the budget is kept into the small leather bag and it will going to submitted in the parliament. So the budget is an annual financial statement which shows the estimated income and the expenditure of the government. So every year the government will be drawn one of the statement, financial statement. So what are the things are going to implemented, or how many type of the tax are going to increase, how many type of the tax are maybe decrease, and all the financial statement will be mentioned in any of the statement, and it will be going to submitted in the parliament at every year. So it is a document containing a preliminary approval plan of public revenue and expenditures. It is a document containing the preliminary approval plan of the public expenditures. Normally, if you want to doing any of the plan, any of the things, any of the functions, we will must take a plan. How much of the budget will be arise. So this is also the same only. So here the two type of the budget. The two government will be going to run a budget. That budget is classified as a two types: union budget and the state budget. So India is a federal economy. Federal economy means, so along with the integrated state government only is considered as a central government. Hence the public budget is divided into the two layers of the government. So according to the Indian constitutions, the central government has to submit the annual financial statement in the central government parliament. Like that, every state government also have to done one of the state government, one of the state budget, and it is going to submitted in the legislative assembly. Next, some other types of the budget. What are the other types are there? So on the basis of the expenditure and revenue account and other accounts, we can classify the budget as a under the way. First one is revenue budget. It consists of revenue receipts and revenue expenditures. Moreover, the revenue receipts can be categorized into the tax revenue and non-tax revenue. In whichever way the government is going to earning the revenue is considered as a revenue budget. The revenue expenditures can also categorized into the planned revenue expenditures and non-planned revenue expenditures. So before or the pre-planned, the method of the pre-planned, if you are getting some of the revenue, it is called planned revenue budget. And without having the plan, if we have some of the possibilities to get the revenue, that is called non-planned revenue budget. Next, capital budget. So it consists of capital receipts and capital expenditures. In this case, the main sources of capital receipts are loans, advances, etc. In which method our capital is going to increase, or in the way of capital, if you are getting some of the revenue, that is called capital budget. Next, supplementary budget. During the time of war, emergencies, and natural calamities like tsunami, floods, etc., the expenditures allotted in the budget provisions are not always enough. So, under these circumstances, a supplementary budget can be presented by the government to tackle these unforeseen events. So, every year the government will be allotted some amount of the money for the government expenditures, the public expenditures. But unexpected ways, unfortunately, if you are fell down from the natural calamities like tsunami, floods, and the earthquake, so the government have to take the most responsibilities. The government have to recovering the all the peoples from their nations. So it will be allotted another one of the budget. That budget is considered as a supplementary budget. Next is zero-based budget. The government of India presented the zero-based budgeting at first in 1987 to 88. It involves the fresh evaluation of expenditure in the government budget, assuming it as a new time. Because every year the government we are actually made some of the budget. Suppose next year all the price and some of the things will be increased. So if the governments are going to think if the sufficient level of the fund is there to complete any of the schemes, it will be arranged another one of the budget. This budget is considered as a survey based budget. Even if any of the amount is spent to complete the schemes, that amount will not take into the account. The new account will be considered. Next, the performance budget. When the outcome of any activity is taken as the base of any budget, such budget is known as performance budget. For the first time in the world, the performance budget was made in USA. In the performance budget, it is the compulsion of the government to tell what is done, how much done for the betterment of the peoples. It is the outcome budget. Outcome budget means for exposing their achievement. If they are made some of the budget, it's called performance budget. Next, the budget also can be classified under the two types: balanced budget and the unbalanced budget. Balanced budget means already we have studied. The balanced budget is a situation in which the estimated revenue of the government during the year is equal to the anticipated expenditure. The government estimated revenue is equal to the government proposed expenditure. It is called balanced budget. The if the revenue of the government and the expenditure of the government is being equal, that is considered as a balanced budget. The expenditure and the revenue always will be equal. That is called a balanced budget. Next, the unbalanced budget. The unbalanced budget also can classified as a two types. First one is surplus budget. Next one is deficit budget. The surplus budget means the budget is a surplus when the estimated revenue of the year are greater than the anticipated expenditures. So the income will be surplus. Income will be as a surplus. If the government revenue is more than their expenditures, we can consider the budget as a surplus budget. So here the government estimated revenue is greater than the estimated government expenditures. If the surplus is greater than their expenditure, it is called surplus budget. Next, deficit budget. The deficit budget is one where the estimated government expenditure is more than expected revenue. If the government revenues is less than the government expenditures, it is considered as a deficit budget. So in that time only we will be in the need of borrowing the money from any of the international financial organizations. Next, budgetary procedures. Budgetary procedures. How the budget is going to submitted. How the budget is going to submitted in the parliament and the legislative assembly. First, the preparation of the budget. First, the budget is going to prepare. The Ministry of Finance prepares the central budget every year. At the state level, the finance department is responsible for the annual state budget. While preparing the budget, some of the factors are taken into account. What are the factors have to taken into account mean? The macroeconomic targets to be achieved within a planned period. So normally we have studied the macroeconomic targets must be achieved within the planned period. Next, the basic strategy of the budget. So when they are preparing the budget, what are the strategy was used to made it? Next, the financial requirement of different project. The financial requirement of different projects means, so what are the projects are there? For the project for infrastructure facilities, project for the hygienic, education, agricultural sector, industrial sector, everything also have to mention. Next, estimates of revenue expenditures. Estimated the revenue expenditures. Next, estimates of the capital expenditures also have to mention here. And estimates of revenue receipts from the tax and non-tax revenues also have to mention here. So already we have missed to study the types of revenue budgets and the estimate of revenue budgets from the tax and non-tax revenue. We have studied already, I think. So from wherever we have the chance to earning the income from without tax, that is called non-tax revenue. By the way of tax, if you are getting the revenue, that is called tax revenue. So everything also have to mention there. Next, presentation of the budget. So the Honorable Minister of Finance on behalf of the central government places the union budget before the parliament and the even a few new financial years. Similarly, at the state levels, the Honorable Finance Minister of the respective state government places the state budget before the state legislature. So, according to the Indian constitutions, all money bills must be initiated in the lower house. All the money bills are first placed before the Lok Sabha at the center and before the Vidhan Sabha. Next, execution of budget. The budget is mainly executed by different departments of the government. Proper execution of the budgetary provisions are important for the efficient utilization of the allocated funds. And not only that, this parliament budget is consisted to the debate. So it must be as a reasonable or the efficiently. Okay students, I think it's enough. So if you have any doubts in this area, please ask me. Thank you.